So far, all of our Docker files have ended with an entry point instruction, but there are two ways to specify a default executable in a Docker file: entry point and command. In this lesson, we'll discuss the command instruction and the differences between it and the entry point instruction. For a container to be runnable without specifying an executable at the end of a Docker run command, the Docker file that produced the container image either needs a command or an entry point instruction. The Alpine Linux Docker image doesn't specify a command or an entry point. Let's try running it without passing in a command to Docker run. The error message here tells us that Alpine Linux doesn't specify an executable using either instruction in its Docker file. Most Linux distribution Docker images specify bin.sh or bin.bash as their executable so that you can run them interactively without specifying a command. Let's take a look at a Docker file that specifies a command instruction. Our command instruction here is very simple. Notice that the command instruction is simply cmd. We want the container created from this image to ping O'Reilly.com. If we build the image and run it without specifying an executable, the ping command will run. This is similar to using Entrypoint, except that we can override the command by passing in a command at the end of the Docker run call. Let's run this container with the command ls-l to list all of the files in the current working directory. Using the command instruction allows us to completely override the executable run inside the container. Let's take a look at a Docker file using Entrypoint now. In this Docker file, we're specifying our entry point as the executable ping. This defines the default executable for the image. The main difference here is that we can't override the executable by passing in a command at the end of Docker run. With entry point, anything we pass in at the end of Docker run is passed to the entry point as arguments. So let's test it out. We now see the usage for ping because our entry point no longer specifies a host. If we pass in O'Reilly.com at the end of the Docker run command, where we would normally specify an executable, we'll see that it's actually passed to the ping entry point as an argument. There's our expected output. Let's kill this container with Control-C. When we hit Control-C, we send a sigterm command to the Docker container. Since the ping command is pid1 in the container, ping shuts down when we stop the container. Notice in our entry point instruction that we specify our executable as a JSON list. This is known as the exec form. The exec form runs the specified command directly without using a shell, and this means that the command running in this format will always be pid1 in the container and should be able to be shut down gracefully using sigterm. We don't have to use the exec form though. There's another form known as the shell form that we can specify. The shell form just specifies the command token separated by spaces, just like you would normally type it in a terminal. The shell form executes your command by calling bin.sh-c. This means that pid1 in the container is actually the shell, and your command is just another process. One advantage of using the shell form is since your command is executed using a shell, you can resolve environment variables in your command. You can see here that we're echoing the path environment variable in our command. So let's run it. And there's the effective path inside the container. Let's try one more, this time using a long-running process like ping. This Docker file specifies ping using the shell form. Let's see what happens when we run it. The output looks good, but let's try to stop the container using Control-C. Despite using Control-C multiple times, I can't seem to stop the ping process in the container. And that's because the shell doesn't pass the POSIX signals along to the process running. If this were a production application, we would likely have problems with clean deployments. In another tab, we can see that ping is being run via bin/sh by running the command docker ps. And here, we see our command is prefixed by bin.sh. To stop this process, we need to kill it.